the idea really is to affirm the right to information as a critical component of sustainable development as well as the social transformation of our communities. So today is part of that series of reflection, collective reflection. And therefore, I want to invite all of you into today's meeting. And we are privileged to have with us Churchill from HIVOS, who will be making remarks on from the room program, and then we'll be able to pick from Churchill and to listen to other voices. So Churchill, maybe you can take the opportunity to welcome our colleagues into the room.
Thank you, Prof. Just to confirm that you can hear and see me well. Yeah.
Yes, we can see you clearly. It's nice and we can hear you well.
Great. So, today is an important day for everyone, really, and especially for people who work in the civic rights area, because we are marking Universal Access to Information Day, and access to information is really a fundamental right and a facilitator of many other rights across all the categories of human rights. So, HIVOS has a long track record in working with communities around the world to help forge open societies and basically transformation of societies to better situations. And so we thought this year it would be important for us to have a few reflections on how creative sector actors can also be, allies in this journey for the promotion of access to information. And so the theme of our intervention this year is trying to find out the role of creative actors in promoting access to information and also tackling disinformation. So to do that, I prepared just a few slides that will show you how HIVOS approaches this work and how we intend to continue working on it as we go forward. So hoping that you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
As I understand, I have just a few minutes to share these reflections with you. So again, this is the context where HIVOS works. We would like a world where everyone enjoys their freedoms, everyone is free to speak, everyone has an opportunity to spark change, to experience love and be open and be able to also challenge power and all the other structures in society that either facilitate or bar us from living our lives in full potential. So this is what Room does. Room supports the work of creatives across Eastern Africa to produce content that is termed as content that has counter-hegemonic narrative. So basically content that asks questions about things that are mostly spoken about, or content that talks about things that are rarely talked about. And so this work is being done across Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. So this is a picture from one of our partners from Zanzibar, Sis, who I believe should be in the room by now, who have been working to produce content in Tanzania for a women empowerment messaging. Zanzibar, of course, a difficult context. Some areas there are difficult contexts for women, and so using just music to promote women empowerment messaging. So a few reflections. One that I would like us to maybe reflect on this day and even just going forward. So how are creatives agents of access to information through the works they produce, through the questions they ask in the work they produce, and also through the people they work with? The other thing is counter-hegemonic perspectives as a form of promotion of access to information. What we mean by this is when we create content, say content that asks us to think differently about our politics, to think differently about issues like procurement, to think differently about issues like secondhand clothing in the context of Uganda. Isn't this a way of promoting access to information? Because creatively packaged content is sometimes more easily digestible as opposed to content that is packaged maybe by media or by academics. So these are some things that we'd like to think through as we go forward. So this is a picture of one of our partners from Uganda working on asking difficult questions about the second-hand clothes industry in Uganda and also Eastern Africa. Another reflection here, information for inclusion and diversity in the context of even the recent ban by KFCB in Kenya, stating that that film Samuel is banned from exhibition in Kenya. It shows you that creatives are playing a huge part in promoting inclusion and diversity, because a lot of the times when we have discussions about LGBT rights in Kenya, it's usually in the context of an artistic production being banned. And so it usually serves two purposes. One, to remind the society that we are still in a situation in Kenya where we have moralistic people who are in leadership positions, yet Kenya is not one of those societies where you can say that everyone should be religious and all of that. And then also two, that creatives really are the people who are making these bold steps to remind society that this is the situation and this is what needs to be done. Another issue is artistic medium and access to information. Medium here means, for example, when you have artists producing content through virtual reality, augmented reality, there's issues of access there. Then you have artists who produce content through podcasts, content that can be shared on radio, on TV. So we are trying to create a situation where there's diversity in the medium that is produced, and so that there's no medium that perhaps is ignored just because there isn't enough development in that area, or there are not enough resources and tools in that area. But that's a whole other area that we'll be looking at going forward. So two last reflections. One, Room is very digital platform centric, meaning we do a lot of our interventions on social media and also on platforms such as Zoom. And the last thing, as we have these discussions here today in the context of access to information, is how can we view art as development and not really as an ally of development. I think this is a challenge that was posed to me recently by a cultural commentator in Kenya, Joyce Nyairo, and also I think was supported by Yvonne Adhiambo. So how do we view art as development and not as something that then facilitates something else? So thank you. Looking forward to the discussions today and hoping you all enjoy. Thank you so much. And on behalf of HIVOS, welcome.
Thank you, Churchill. I remember that discussion that Dr. Joyce Nyairo floated, and which Yvonne also, picked on. I saw it in social media. And I will be moving a little bit in my short comments onto that debate, because I think it's really important for us to reflect collectively about the role of art and creativity in society generally. So I would like to share my thoughts. Let me just share. Yeah, I'd like to share my reflections on the subject because we have this amazing opportunity to think together about our role in this right, in affirming the right to know. So obviously, part of what we do as creatives is to enhance beauty as we see it in the world. So we do actually contribute in amplifying, our creativity around the environment in which we live. So we celebrate beauty, we celebrate the environment, we celebrate our interpretation of the world, but we also do change the world even as we do that. So what we're trying to do basically is to say, look, when we access information, we contribute in the duality of art. And one of the functions of art is really to celebrate what we have, and what we have is our diversity. What we have is a very rich environment. And what we have also is the ability to stretch our imagination as we do in, for example, science fiction. And we imagine futures and we imagine the past, and we bring all that together. So, but we cannot do that without access to information. We need to be able to access information so that we can stretch our imagination backwards and forwards. And also we will, and again, this one we'll revisit on Thursday, hopefully, answering the question, how do we tackle misinformation, which sometimes undermines the right to access the right information. So I want to start by really revisiting the question of creativity, and really to say that when we create, we contribute to aesthetics. We create to the appearance of things. We contribute to enhancing the image of things, to make those things attractive to our inner selves. And when we do that, we inject something at the level of emotions, something that excites our hearts and our feelings and so forth. So that is important, and that's really, really key for our own development as human beings. We should be able to celebrate beauty and be happy on account of that. But also, we, to the extent that our creativity utilizes labor and capital and space and so on, we do contribute to the economic and social transformation of our societies. And of course, when we do that, we also contribute to the political transformation of our societies. So it's this duality, the duality of the intrinsic value of society, of art, which makes us happier and so on, but also the extrinsic value, which makes us contribute to the social transformation of our societies. I think that it is the second value, the extrinsic value, which is external to art, that sometimes gets contested by people who say that when we focus on the extrinsic value of art, we undermine art itself. But I think that many of us believe that it is in the coexistence of the best in art and the best in content that makes art powerful. And the best in content is the art that asks questions about our society. So, so some of the issues, and I think that we will be discussing this in greater detail, is to ask the question, to what extent are room grantees and those of us also who work in art generally and the media, to what extent are we amplifying the right to accessing information? I mean, I'm a writer, and I can tell you that one of the things that we always do and which we believe in is that we should be contributing to the well-being of our communities. We should be contributing to enhancing the education of our communities, to enhancing the urban space, to increasing inclusion, to depicting reality, as we see it, and to imagining other alternative futures, so that if our society is ruptured and it is conflicted and it has challenges, is it possible for us to imagine a future in which people are much more caring and more empathetic and more inclusive and so forth? And of course, the fact that when we access information, we support active citizenship in public affairs. We we are encouraging our people to become active participants in the affairs of the nation, other than just victims or observers of public affairs, but actually actively involved, because they are informed and they're able to make informed choices on the basis of the information that they have. And of course, when we do this, when we access information and we utilize that information as the sector, we also enhance the climate of debate so that we are not debating cyclically. I mean, we should be able to debate going forward because we have information that allows us to engage in a deeper way. And of course, the question of interrogating and shifting perceptions about the world, so that we shift perceptions because we have the facts, and so on. And I think that for today, because today is such an important day, is to say that we have every right to claim the right to accessing information, that we need to claim this right. It should not just exist in an abstract manner. It should be claimed by the creative sector, and we should be able to use it. So, the right to seek information, to receive information, to impart information and ideas, and whether that can be in the form of graffiti art or in the form of writing the novel, and so on. So these things, in my view, are really, really important, because we cannot shift the world without information. So when you look at what the tribalist youth, for example, are doing in Nakuru, using looking at the data in terms of what are the conflicts, the conflictual, topics, or topics that are likely to create conflict in the communities, whether it is police brutality or whether it is strong ethnic affiliation that tends to be polarizing, and so on, and the ways in which they engage that points to a sensitivity to information in the community. These are the things that create tension in Nakuru, and we can deal with those. Or when you look at issues related to LGBTQ, rights, and the ways in which some of the room grantees are engaged with those issues to shift perceptions about those communities. Very, very important, because again, you cannot change a situation by denying its existence. You change situations by accepting the existence of a phenomenon, and then be able to engage with it. And of course, access to information is really, really critical. Or in the case of Uganda, for example, the issue that mental health around COVID, and we know how our health has been affected by COVID-19, and what policy is doing in using data to address concerns of mental health. Again, using information to shift understanding, to shift ideas. So I think that it is important for us to claim this right, to claim the right, and to say, with this information, we can change things. And of course, within that general context of access to information, we know what happened to Rafiki in terms of it being banned, and much more recently, iSamuel being restricted, again on account of the denial of the existence of LGBTQ communities in East Africa. But when you have information, you can actually start appreciating that we do have that community, and they have a story to tell, and citizens have a right to listen to that story. So in other words, by knowing, we empower people to demand rights, we increase opportunity for fair, free, and credible elections. We will be going to elections very soon. We fight corruption and abuse of public office, because we have information related to corruption and the ways in which abuse of public office takes place. And I looked at information from the Commission for Administrative Justice in the last election. I studied what they saw, and it was very clear that public offices were abused by our officers. We can enhance freedom of development, the freedom to have shelter, the freedom to have water, the freedom to have reasonable housing, and so on, because we have information. When we don't have the information, we cannot fight for those freedoms. It's only when we have that information that we can actually push for those freedoms in our creativity. And we can also support free and independent media, especially when we know who owns the media, and the decisions they make once they own the media. And we can also enhance gender and other forms of equality. So in a sense then, we can do these things because we have information. And now to move rather quickly to say that art ought to be, in my view, socially engaged. I mean, in a country that is really struggling to move from poverty to more freedoms, I think that we cannot afford to be very casual about the role of art in social transformation. I think that it needs to be engaged. It needs to be able to speak to the critical issues of the day, even as it celebrates itself as a form of imagination. So we should be able to use, theater. We should be able to use music. We should be able to use film. We should be able to do these things. But again, we cannot do that without a sufficient information. And I think that one of the other things that we actually do through engaged art is advancing community dialogue on those issues, so that when we ask questions, as we do in forum theater, for example, about events in our communities, we are encouraging interrogation, we are encouraging unmasking of power, and we are also shifting perceptions and beliefs about social justice. So note that I'm saying that our commitment to socially engaged art is not a denial of the excellence of art by its own right. It is the coexistence of the two, the taxing of the imagination to create the best art, alongside, of course, the social commitment that is key for us. So as artists, cultural producers, and media, we entertain, we inform, we educate, but we are also agents of change, and we are defenders of rights. And again, we cannot become agents of change and defenders of rights without the right information about what it is that we are interrogating, what it is that we are challenging, and so on. And of course, when you think about satire and parody as forms of creativity, those ones are based really on critical observation, as well as analysis and understanding of situations and character. So it's when we observe character closely, when we observe facts closely, that we are able to create satire around those issues. Now, why is this topic urgent currently? First of all, it's because our arts and media are saturated in virtually all spaces, public, social, political, economic, and so on. And there is democratization of audiovisual creation and dissemination because of advances in technology and so on. And therefore, we need to pay more attention than we did before to these matters because of the liberalization of the space and the broader acceptance of arts and culture in public life. And of course, within the context of East Africa and Africa generally, the changing terrain of democracies, the emergence of citizen movements, and greater awareness of inequities, and so on. And I think the youth are leading in this expression, creative expression, in their various forms of art. So the existence of that space, and the existence of a youth demography, and the existence of emerging, citizen movements is really becoming more and more important for us to access information. And of course, the phenomenon of art for art's sake is being isolated, in my view, because of its non-involvement in social change. We think that in some of our countries, whereas we celebrate art as art, we do believe that it needs to be activated so that it also serves larger societies and larger goals that we aspire to achieve. And of course, more and more civil society players are recognizing the role of art and culture, so that mainstream human rights organizations, gender organizations, and so on are recognizing that they must harvest from the arts and media fraternity to be able to achieve their goals. So we are saying, do use the facts that you get creatively to show the truth and expose lies, that we need to be able to contribute to building strong institutions for the public good, and we can only do that with the right information, and that we should be able to help citizens exercise their voice, and to be able to monitor events in their communities based on information, and to really increase accountability within government institutions. We should be having informed citizenship that is driven by knowledge, by information other than rumor. The tendency quite often is to depend on rumor and less to depend on factual information. I think that as creatives, we have this responsibility. We need to be able to empower citizens to claim their rights and to contribute to good governance by demanding transparency of government. And again, when we demand transparency, we are saying we need the information that can help us make concrete demands in that regard. But of course, there are usually structural and political barriers to these issues. Some of it is just the sheer capacity of government to produce information, because the information could be scattered all over the place and therefore not easily accessible. Sometimes it's about the ability of citizens themselves to demand that information, because that information is available in maybe scientific language or in English, and our people do not speak English, and so on. So those are some of the challenges, but we can break those barriers by making the information simpler, doing advocacy work, building networks with our communities as well as across the sector, and really simplifying information so that it's made accessible. And as far as government is concerned, I think there is a huge responsibility to give information without even being asked to give it. And I think that the phenomenon of open governance is a very, very important one. So that when I need information that I can use to generate a play, I should be able to go into a government website and access that information without too much of a hurdle. And also, really availability of legislation and regulation that allows certain types of information to be available to citizens. We recognize that there are certain challenges, invocations of security, invocations of privacy, and so forth and so on. But really broadly, information should be disclosed with very, very minimum exceptions. And the procedure of getting that information should also be easy. So we minimize the bureaucracy of accessing information so that citizens can access it without having too many hurdles. And that when we do not have information that we require, we can appeal to get that information with minimal cost to our time and our pockets. And I think that when governments are able to do that, when they are able to open themselves, they make citizens freer, they allow citizens to participate more effectively in the social transformation of the country. And I think that as creatives, we have this immense responsibility to push for these things and to push them as a right, not as a privilege given to us by the political elite, and that it's really our right to the extent that we are human beings, and to the extent that we pay taxes, and to the extent that we are, we are voters, and that we are taxpayers, and so on. So really, to say that as creatives, we ought to become advocates for the right to accessing information, and that we also need to be actively involved in creating active citizenship through sharing of information creatively and simplifying it so that our people can consume it in an easier manner. I want to stop at that point, really, to just to say that I just wanted to highlight a few thoughts about the critical role that we can play as creatives. I can see that our colleagues from Tanzania have not joined yet, if I am not mistaken. So I think I would like to pass the baton to, I don't know whether our colleagues, Philip has joined. I don't think he has.
No, they've not been able to join. Huh? I don't know what the issue is, but our colleagues from Tanzania and Uganda are not able to join. I don't know what the problem is.
I have no idea what the problem is, but we can get, maybe Victor can make his comments. Yeah,
but
Victor, please.
Via YouTube, I guess.
Okay, great. So, Victor, if you can step in. I may just say that Victor works with the Commission for Administrative Justice, and he is really critical to us because he works in the area of strategy and planning. And as you may know, the Commission is the custodian of the Access to Information Act. So it's really a privilege to have Victor Ongaya with us this morning. So Victor, now it's your turn.
Thank you, Prof. Let me just bring up my presentation. So once again, thank you so much, Prof, for organizing this and also inviting the CAJ to this forum. It's actually a good platform that CAJ also has gotten to be able to reach out to a critical community of our society, that is the creative sector, and we really appreciate. So without wasting any more time, allow me to go straight to the presentation. So basically, as rightly shared by Prof, CAJ is an organization that is a government institution. We are a constitutional commission established under the Constitution of Kenya. And basically, our link with the Access to Information Act is that we have the role of enforcing and overseeing that it is implemented within the country. So for today, we are going to take about 40 or so minutes to just share with the participants on the Access to Information Act, the legal framework, and some of its provisions, and basically how you as the creative sector can be able to benefit from it, and also help us as the Commission to better implement it within the country. And you know, some of the things I'm going to talk about have already been shared by the two previous presenters. I think Churchill highlighted some few issues about the Access to Information Act. Prof has also gone in a bit deeper to look at basically your role as the creative sector, and basically also what we on the part of the government they need to do. So we'll be, looking at some of those as well as we go through this presentation. Now, as I begin, just a brief introduction to you of who the Commission is. So the Commission on Administrative Justice, also known as the Office of the Ombudsman, is established under Article 59 as Article 4 of the Constitution of Kenya, and also the Commission on Administrative Justice Act of 2011. So under Article 59 of the Constitution of Kenya 2010, there is established the Kenya National Human Rights and Equality Commission, but Article 4 gives leeway to the Parliament, to the National Assembly, basically, to subdivide that one commission, because what is established under Article 59 is one big constitutional commission that was supposed to look into so many issues, one of them being human rights. There was the aspect of gender and equality, and also administrative rights. So the Constitution allowed Parliament to subdivide, if it deemed fit, that one big commission into 3 sister commissions that will then be able to effectively handle distinct mandates. And that is why now, by virtue of Article 59, Article 4, and also the Commission on Administrative Justice Act of 2011, we were then established by an Act of Parliament as an independent commission. Basically, our mandate is twofold. The mandate of the commission extends also to both national and county government. So our traditional mandate, and basically the traditional mandate of any ombudsman institution, is to promote administrative justice by fighting what we call maladministration. So maladministration basically means bad administration or poor administration. So we fight this by way of receiving complaints from members of the public on some of the ill practices or poor governance practices that are taking place, especially within the public offices and public entities, as members of the public go to seek services from these public offices. Then sometime in 2016, we were given an additional mandate of enforcing and also oversighting access to information in Kenya, with the passing of the Access to Information Act of 2016. And basically, this is the mandate that we will be discussing in detail today. So I'll move next to now just looking at an overview of the right of access to information framework in Kenya. So allow me to start with this quote from one Mr. Abdul Wahid Khan, who worked as the Assistant Director General for Communication and Information at UNESCO between the year 2001 and 2010. And he said, the free flow of information and ideas lies at the very heart of the very notion of democracy, and is also crucial to the respect for human rights. So central to this guarantee in practice of the free flow of information and also ideas is the principle that public bodies, basically government, holds information not for themselves, but on behalf of the public. And this is self-explanatory that we in government, whatever information we generate, we are generating because of the citizens of this country. So that, at no point then should that information that has been generated in the cause of serving our citizens then be limited to them in terms of, access to them. So this should be the guiding principle for all government entities. And just by way of introduction, and we are still looking at this, from the broader perspective of the right to information. We are yet now to narrow down to the Access to Information Act of 2016. So the right of access to information can be defined as the ability of citizens of any nation to be able to obtain information that is in possession of that state. So the essence of this right, as as seen in the quote before, is that the government does not hold information for itself, but it's just a custodian on behalf of the citizen. And the reason for this is, simple, that all that information that is generated in the course of serving the citizens, yeah? And as well, then it's supposed to be information that is helpful to the citizens of that country. So at no point, ideally, nor unless then, you know, there are very, very compelling reasons, then should government then deny access to information. And I think later on we'll look at some of these so-called compelling reasons that might force a government to withhold information from its citizens. So effective access to information is actually one of the first steps in ensuring that you empower citizens of any country to be able to engage in a degree of control over public institutions, and also in accordance with the Constitution. So when you effectively give access to this information, then you are enabling citizens to be part of government, yeah, to help in the planning and, you know, the execution of whatever plans that the government has in place. And basically, this is one of the things that looking at our own, you know, Constitution as Kenya, comes out, you know, very strongly. Public participation, and what we say is there are many ways you can engage the public. You can engage them, you know, in the course of doing things, but you can also engage them by way of giving them information so that they can be able then to know what is happening and be able then, or rather be in a position to, you know, give feedback to you as government here. And the easiest way to do this then is through the use of the Access to Information Act, whereby you allow citizens, yeah, and members of the public generally to get information from you, to criticize to criticize you in a productive way by, you know, giving you feedback basically on what you are doing as far as running the country is concerned. So this is one right that is very instrumental, and I think this is something that Churchill alluded to earlier on, that you know, through the right to information, then you can be able to leverage on it to enjoy many other rights that have been provided to you as a citizen. So there's a linkage between, you know, the right to information, you as an individual getting information, and you enjoying many other socioeconomic rights that have been, you know, provided to you by the Constitution. So this right is one cross-cutting act that is multidimensional. You know, it cuts across various sectors, and, you know, looks at various ways of ensuring that we include the citizens in the running of government. Then it also enables, and it's a facilitative right, which is crucial in all elements of democratization, good governance, and also socioeconomic development. So to ensure that we have democracy, then we need, you know, as one of the things that are critical, to ensure that there is right to information, so that people can be able to get knowledge that is, you know, going to be helpful to them in making decisions, to ensure there is good governance, that we fight the ills, the corruptions, you know, and responsiveness and fairness in government, all aspects of good governance. Then we also have to start by implementing the right to information, so that, you know, people then can know what their rights are and what to expect from service providers. And these are basically government entities, yeah, so that we can be able to entrench the principles of good governance. Then socioeconomic development, you know, we can only take advantage of, you know, the many other rights that the Constitution gives us if we have the right information. So that basically explains the instrumentality of the right to information as far as transforming, you know, the lives of people, and basically how leadership is done, and also services are provided within a country. So very quickly, just you know, skimming through some of the reasons why we think the right to information is important. First is that it encourages public participation, especially in development of things like policies, making decisions by government, and also certain other private and public bodies. In essence, what it does is that it helps in promoting democracy within the country. Right to information also helps in combating corruption, especially within public institutions, because we are showing our accountabilities to the citizens that have given us this job that we are doing today. So by opening up on basically how we are running our activities, how we are spending the finances that come from public coffers, how we are making decisions internally, decisions which affect the members of the public, then we are opening up ourselves to the citizens, and by so doing, then we are creating that sense of accountability. And this is one critical thing that when government approaches development partners for assistance by way of foreign direct investments and any other grants to support the operations of government. These are some of the things that these development partners look at. They are interested to know, if we put our investment in your country, is it going to have any impact, or is that money going to disappear because of corruption? So when we implement the right to information, then we are able to give sort of such assurance to our development partners that you are giving us these funds, and we are open in terms of how we are spending it, so the public can even audit how that money has been spent, and results will be assured. The other importance is that access to information promotes the rule of law. It ensures there's openness, transparency, and basically accountability in the delivery of public services, because we are urging public entities, we are urging also certain private entities, and I'll explain which certain private entities these ones are in a slide that is just ahead. We are making them be open to all and sundry, basically on what it is that they are doing, how it is that they are spending the finances they have, how it is that they are making their decisions, and these decisions, how are they likely to affect, the common citizen. So by that, then we are helping in promoting the rule of law, which is basically what the Constitution is pushing for. Then it helps in implementing the Constitution, because it is a requirement, specifically looking at the Constitution of Kenya. It is one of the requirements there. Then it facilitates the country to meet its international and regional obligations. So as a country, Kenya is signatory to various treaties, some of which touch on human rights, others combating corruption, and also a few others, directly looking at access to information. So we do report to these international and regional bodies on how far we are with implementing the access to information right. So, by ensuring then we have a framework of implementing it in the country, then we are able to get accurate data that helps us, to report to these international and regional bodies. Then it is also important for the realization of other acts, other rights, and we've looked at that, this is one facilitative act, that transformative act, that can be leveraged on for the enjoyment of very many other rights that have been provided to us, basically as human beings. So with the right to information, then you are able to get to know the other rights, and how to also benefit from them. Then lastly, access to information or the right to information can facilitate effective decision making, even at a personal level, because if you have adequate information, then you're able to look at various alternatives before making a decision. So this is just a summary of some of the ways that the right to information is important. Now, narrowing down now to the Access to Information Act of 2016, just an overview of the Act. This is a law that applies in Kenya, and it was passed by the Parliament of Kenya on 21st of September 2016. And the aim was to make it easier for all Kenyan citizens to access. And by access, then we mean to get, to receive, or to reach information from government and also certain private institutions. So this Act of 2016 obligates public bodies and also certain private bodies to facilitate access to information that is held by them. And I think in the next slide, we are going to look at, which are these private bodies that fall under the provisions of the Access to Information Act. So the purpose basically is first to give effect to the right to information under Article 35 of the Constitution. So Article 35 of the Constitution provides for access to information. So this is the act then that amplifies that article by, giving out the framework of how that information then is supposed to be provided. The act also provides a framework for what we call proactive disclosure of information and also provision of information upon request. So these are the two main ways that the Act proposes that information is disclosed. So proactive disclosure is whereby as public entities, we go out of our way to give that information that we think is of public interest, even in the absence of that information being requested for by members of the public. And Section 5 of the Access to Information Act then, provides the framework within which then how public institutions should be able to disclose this information. So it requires that, there is certain information, the minimum threshold of the kind of information that should be provided. And we are looking at the information about an organization. So as CAJ, the Commission on Administrative Justice, who are we? How are we established? How are we running our operations? So, this is information that ideally members of the public should have without even requesting. So how we were established, how we carry out our operations, how we are organized internally, that is information that should be in the public domain. Then secondly is how we are using the funds that we receive from government. And we are looking at this in two ways. So first of all, it is a requirement that specifically for public institutions in Kenya, under this Act, one, they should disclose the salaries of their officers by grade. And please mark that we are talking of salaries of officers by grade, not the actual salaries of officers. So basically what the Act requires is all public institutions then should be able to give a list of the grades that exist within that institution. And in government, we mostly use the job groups, so that a public institution should then be able to provide a list of all the job groups that are contained within that institution and the range of salaries, what is the minimum and what is the maximum salary that, applies then to those staff that work within that institution. So that is one way of looking at how we are spending our finances. The other way that the Act requires us to disclose information about how we are spending monies that we receive from public coffers is also now to look at how we are doing our procurement. So we are also required as public institutions then to give information to the public on the procurement contracts that we've entered into within a certain period of time. And for ease of comparison, then we consider a financial year. That within a financial year, then you need to disclose the kind of contracts you've entered into as a public entity, the worth of those contracts, the period or rather the term of the contracts, and basically who are the successful providers of whatever services that you've contracted for. So that's the other way then we are supposed to disclose information about the funds that we are using. Then the other thing is that we need to make information easily accessible. By that then we are required to proactively then give sort of a listing of the kind of information that we hold, so that it can be easier for members of the public to be able to access this information when it is in an organized manner, rather than, putting information, for instance, on our websites that is jumbled up, so that even getting to access the information can be a bit troublesome. So the Act requires that we package this information in a way that is very, very easily accessible, and we communicate to the members of the public. So basically, that is what Section 5 of the Access to Information Act then specifies, that we need to give information without even being asked, provided that this information is of public interest and it gives the threshold of the kind of information that should ideally be given out. So still looking at that point, that should be bullet number 2, to provide a framework for proactive disclosure of information and also provision of information on request. So the one way that, government can give information is through proactively disclosing. The other way then is through giving information upon request. So upon request is whereby now members of the public are allowed to come out and, approach these public entities and request for specific information that might not have been proactively disclosed. So then public institutions, and of course through the support of CAJ, have been sensitized since implementation of this act. And also we have tried to build their capacity to put in place then the infrastructure to enable them to proactively give out information as and when that information is requested for. So it requires that then public institutions should put in place several things, including what we call the Information Access Officer. So the Information Access Officer is actually the person with the principal administrative responsibilities within an institution. Yeah, most of the time this will be the accounting officer for that institution. So this is the person who is supposed to ensure that they put in place the framework for access to information, so that people then can be able to come and request for information and they can be given that information. So this is, among the bare minimum requirements that are required of public institutions, that they need to put in place somebody, to have somebody who will be able to receive requests that are coming from the members of the public on access to information. Now, if I may take you back a bit, I think in the opening bullet, we introduced this as a law passed by Parliament to make it easier for Kenyan citizens to access information. So, as rightly put, then this act and its provisions is only to be enjoyed by the citizens of Kenya. And basically, as we were developing this act in Kenya, we did a lot of benchmarking with other countries that had done this before. India was a country we borrowed a lot from their piece of legislation. Sweden is another one. And basically what we are seeing that most access to information legislations that have been implemented by countries are usually meant to be enjoyed by the citizens of that country. But, as a country then, we are alive to the fact that, we are in the era of integration, and, we are trying to look at a way of working with our partner countries through establishments like the East African Community and so many other blocks that are coming up. So it is not lost for our partners, probably in Uganda and Tanzania, that you should not say that you cannot benefit from this act, because as I have shared, that there are two ways that information can be disclosed. So one is through proactive disclosure, and with proactive disclosure, information that is on the website of a Kenyan public body can be accessed from anywhere. So you are still covered, and as our partners from the TZ, from Uganda, from Rwanda, from across East Africa, and even beyond, because our websites, the websites of public entities, are still accessible even from outside the country. And basically, this is what we are really pushing for. And I think sometime in 2019, we did a circular to all public entities, trying to remind them that it is a requirement of the Access to Information Act that they proactively disclose information. And that requires that, we put in as much information as possible on our websites, so that people can be able to access information that is of benefit to them. So, and we've gone a long way in trying to ensure that this is implemented. As the Commission, we have a way of enforcing this. On quarterly basis, we usually receive reports from public entities reporting to us basically how they are dealing with the complaints from members of the public. That is to look at our one mandate on maladministration. Then on this other mandate on access to information, we require public institutions also to report to us on how many requests for access to information they have received from members of the public, how they have acted upon them, and any other things to do with access to information. For instance, as well, also the amount of monies they've raised from giving access to information, because we consider this as critical information to help us understand how access to information is being implemented in Kenya. Besides that, I think we've also engaged partners, and I would want to single out EVOS on this. Sometime last year, towards the end of the year, I think EVOS supported the CHA in coming up with what we call an online monitoring tool on access to information. So basically, EVOS supported us to procure a consultant to develop for us a tool that will be, I think they call it web scrapping. Yeah, it goes to the websites of public institutions to look at whether these public institutions have been able to disclose information, proactively, as per what the Constitution requires. So the bare minimum threshold that is given under the Access to Information Act, that is basically what we are looking for. Has this institution given information about how it was formed? Has this institution given information about how they are spending their finances? Have they given information about the programs or the projects of their main activities that they've been established to do? Because there is the core mandate that an institution is established to do. So basically, those are some of the ways we are trying to enforce access to information within the country, so that increasingly we can have information being given out, so that this information then can be used for decision making by members of the public, but also it can be used then to sort of audit how government is functioning. So I'll move to the next objective or purpose of the Act. It is to, I think we've talked about that, to promote routine and systematic information disclosure. So basically, this is the requirement that public institutions are supposed to routinely give information. So the institutions are required at the end of each quarter or each financial year, to be able to update information with new information that has come up here. So that is provided for under the Act as well. Then to provide for the protection of persons who disclose information of public interest and in good faith. These are otherwise known as whistleblowers. So for those who are privy to the going-ons within the country, Kenya currently does not have an established legal framework for protection of whistleblowers. Of course, we have one for witness protection, but whistleblowers are a different group of people. These are people who want to report on some of maybe the wrongdoings in government. So this Act provides that all public institutions should encourage whistleblowing, and they should put in place then mechanisms to ensure that whistleblowers are protected and not victimized. And in any case then that a whistleblower is victimized, then we have CHA as an appeals mechanism, that they can come to seek protection from. So that's the other thing that, the Act looks at, because some of this information that is whistleblowers could be information that touches on, the health and safety of individuals of the country. It could be touching about the national security of this country. So these are important things that we think that we should then promote, and that's why then the Act talks about promoting whistleblower. Then lastly, to provide a framework to facilitate public education on the right to access to information. So again, the Act places upon us the responsibility to create awareness on the provisions of this act and also the rights of the members of the public. And basically that's why, I started by saying a big thank you to Prof, because you are giving us a platform to reach a critical community within our society, the creative sector, so that we can also share with them. They can know about the existence of the right. They can exploit it, they can use that right to seek information from government. They can also make use of that right to criticize government where probably government is going wrong. So as CAJ, again, we appreciate such opportunities whereby we are able then to reach out to the various target groups as far as access to information is concerned. So we say that the Act also, the provisions of the Act apply to certain private institutions. And these are institutions that may not be part of government, but they receive public resources or benefits or funds. So there are certain instances whereby the government works with even CSOs or NGOs, and supports them to implement some activities. So to the extent that then they are receiving funding from government in implementing some projects or activities, then they are then bound by the provisions of the Access to Information Act. So there are also certain private bodies that provide services that can be considered to be public services. And these would include even the private hospitals. Like taking the example of our country, Kenya, we have hospitals like Aga Khan, we have the Nairobi Women Hospital, we have the Nairobi Hospital, the current hospital. These are private entities, but because whatever service they are offering can be considered a public service, then they are guided by the provisions of the Access to Information Act. So you can reach out to Nairobi Hospital to request for access to information on the basis of this act, and Nairobi Hospital is supposed to give you access to that information, basically. So also public institutions that are contracted to exploit national resources. So there are certain private institutions that have been given exclusive contracts to exploit national natural resources in the country. At some point, we had Tullow Oil trying to explore oil in northern part of the country. We had, I think we have Base Titanium, if I'm not wrong, in the coastal region, trying to exploit minerals as well. So, these are private entities, but they have that exclusive contract given to them by government to exploit our natural resources. So because of that, then they are bound by the provisions of the Act. They need also to, be open to us as citizens of this country on how then they are using the natural resources they are exploiting from us, how they are carrying out their activities. We need to know basically then how they are protecting the environment, because such activities then usually have some negative impacts on the environment. So they are bound by the provisions of the Act, so that they also need to disclose information when they are asked. So it also means that any private institution that is likely to be in possession of information that could be of public interest, because of its connection to the protection of human rights. So we could be having an NGO that holds information that is considered of very high public interest. For instance, it's information about corruption in the country. This is an NGO that has critical information that can help expose corruption activities within the country. So such private institutions then are also covered by the Access to Information Act. Then lastly, any private entity that would also, I think still within that point, then have information that is connected with the protection of human rights, environment, or even the public health, or any legal activities that would be taking place within the country. So these are the private bodies then that are covered by the provisions of the Access to Information Act. So very quickly, we look at the legal framework on access to information. So we have the national legal framework. So the framework for access to information is the Access to Information Act. and these are founded under the Constitution. So there are about 6 different articles under the Constitution that talk about access to information. So first is the national values and principles of government. So basically these are found at Article 10 of the Constitution, and they exemplify some of the principles that we espouse as a country and that promote good governance and democracy. So, provision of information, these are some of the things, accountability and so many others. Then we have Article 31 of the Constitution that talks about privacy. So this Access to Information Act is also very keen on the privacy of individuals, so that in as much as we are saying then access to information should be granted to all citizens, there are certain instances where we have what we call limitations, and I think we'll look at them in the next slide, that information that is likely to touch on the privacy of an individual then should ideally be not given out, except then with the express permission of the concerned individual. There's also Article 33, which talks of freedom of expression. Article 34, 35, 34 talks about the freedom of the media. 35 talks about access to information. There's also Article 232 of the Constitution, which talks about values and principles of public service. So basically, we're looking at things like accountability, provision of information that is accurate. We are looking at transparency. So all those things, they are articles that in one way or the other, then are promoting the cause of access to information. So we've, since we started this discussion, we've been talking about information. But basically, the critical question here is, what is this that we are calling information? So information as a word does not enjoy a clearly delineated universal meaning, and its definition will vary according to the context in which it is used. If I'm to randomly ask here, because we are from diverse backgrounds, each and every one of us will give their own definition of how they understand information to be. But for purposes of this Act, information is defined under Section 2 of the Access to Information Act as all records that a public institution holds, or even a private body holds. And we've looked at the kind of private bodies that are covered by this Act. So it will be all the records that either the public entity or a private body holds, regardless of the form in which the records are stored, the source of those records, or even the date of production. So any record that is held by a public institution, regardless of where that information came from, how it is stored, whether it is in hard copy, in soft copy, and it's in the clouds, you have it in our offices, regardless of that, then that amounts to or constitutes what is considered information. So basically, these records is what then the Act says that as public entities and also as certain private entities, then we need to go out and out of our way and provide as and when we are asked for this information. And I think, as I've shared earlier on, that dissemination can be done in 2 ways. One of them being proactively, then reactively. Proactively, whereby you give out information even without people asking for it, then reactively by way of giving information upon request from members of the public. And, looking at then the creative sector, Prof did a presentation, and, he among the things he talked about was, how then do you benefit from it? And I would just want to, emphasize on that you are critical in 2 ways. First, on the demand side, there's the demand side and the supply side. That you can, on the demand side, then demand for information from government, because it is your right to get information, some of which then this information can help in your creative works. You could be writing a book, you could be planning to come up with a film, whatever creative work you want to do. And it could be that, to get critical information that will help in development of your critical work then is only accessible through government, then know that from today that you have a right to reach out to a government entity to request to know or to get that information that will help in your creative work. Just before this session, I was, sharing a phone conversation with Prof. And Prof was telling me that the other day, I think you also had an engagement with KRA. And, these are some of the things that, these are some of the ways that you can use this access to information. Yeah? You can reach out to KRA to request to know whether the kind of works that you are planning to develop will attract any taxes. Yeah, you have a right to be explained to. Yeah, to be given as much information as possible on how the tax environment then affects your works. Yeah, and KRA as a public entity is one that we have very cordial relationship with. We have frequent meetings with them just on this matter of access to information, because as I had shared earlier, I said these public entities report to us on a quarterly basis on how they are implementing the Access to Information Act, and so I felt good that you've had that interaction with KRA, and I would like to urge you, reach out to as many public entities as possible that you think might in one way or the other then be able to affect your creative work. Yeah, you can use access to information, to reach out even as an individual. Yeah, to reach out to be able to get information that is critical to what you are doing. So then, how do you request for access to information in the case of the a reactive disclosure of information? So you will need to make a request in writing to the person we call the IAO. IAO is the Information Access to Information Officer of a public entity or the private entity that you want to get that information from. And basically, in most public institutions and even private institutions, this will be the CEO or the person with the principal responsibility. Like within maybe the ministries in Kenya, you can write to the principal secretary of a state department. Within the county governments, you can channel that request to the county chief officer, of the specific county ministry. Within an institution like ours, which is a commission, you can channel that request to the CEO. Same to public institutions that are parastatals. So you need to make a request in writing, because that is what the Act provides, that all requests for access to information have to be done in writing. So you need to do that, stating the kind of information you want, and also the mode or the format in which you want that information to be given to you. And then the Act specifies that this information should be, this request should be done either in English or Swahili. But that does not stop you, for instance, if you have a language barrier or you're illiterate, then from making your request in any other language. So what the Act does is that it places the burden on the person we've named up there, the Information Access Officer, to put in place mechanisms to ensure that, they are able to cater to requests from all requesters. So that if you are somebody who has a disability and probably you cannot communicate by way of talking, then the Information Access Officer has to look for a way of receiving your request for access to information. Either by looking for an interpreter or by facilitating you to express your request in any other way. So that if you are somebody with a language barrier, maybe you don't know either English or Swahili, then it is upon the Information Access Officer to look for somebody who can assist you then to be able to make that request. So much as the Act requires that has to be in writing and in either English or Swahili, again, the Act is very clear that failure to submit your request by way of writing or either in English or Swahili should not then be a reason for you to be denied access to information. So that means that you can just make a call and, give the kind of information request that you have, And ideally, then that public institution or private institution is supposed to be able to process that request. Yeah. So regardless of whether you use these means that have been provided here or not, access to information has to be granted. If at all, then that information does not fall under what we call limited type of information. The other good thing about this act is that it says, regardless of the reasons you give for requesting that access to information, yeah, or the entity's beliefs as to why you would want that information, they have to give access to that information. So if you were to today request for information from CAJ, it is not very, very important that you need to specify why you want that information. The bare minimum threshold is that you need to make a request for that information. And provided that that request or that kind of information does not fall under what is considered limited information, then as CAJ, we are required to give access to that information. So that is very, very important that, we as consumers of this information, we need to know. Then we'll move to, as I near the end of my presentation, to look at what we call limitations of this act. So Section 6 of the Access to Information Act provides for situations or instances or maybe some kinds of information that even if you are to request access for, then that cannot be given. And we call that either limited or exempt information. So information that is likely to undermine the national security of the country cannot be given, even if you request for it. For instance, you cannot go today to make a request to the Ministry of Interior to want to know how many police stations are there within your village and the kind of ammunition that has been stocked there and the number of personnel that is there, because you could be planning to attack that police station. Yeah, so knowing the number of ammunition, the kind and number of ammunition, and the personnel might be a security risk. Yeah, again, information that is likely to endanger either the life or safety of any person, any citizen, yeah, should not be given. So this is where then private information about an individual, however low in the society they are, then cannot be given out. Yeah? For instance, if you want to know, our CEO is a public officer and they use a public vehicle, a vehicle provided by government. But, you cannot say then you want to know which route our CEO uses to go to his home in the evening when they are leaving from work, simply because they are using a government property that is a government vehicle. You could be endangering the life of that CEO. Then any information that is likely to involve unwarranted invasion into the privacy of an individual should also not be given. And you look at Section 2 of the Act, it defines privacy broadly, your gender, your academic qualifications, your marital status, your health status, all these things constitute your private information. So a member of the public cannot just come to your institution to request for information about your marital status, yeah, because that is considered private information. Any information that might infringe commercial interests of an entity or third party, any information that can cause substantial harm to the ability of the country to manage the economy, any information that, I'm sorry, I think we have a blackout, but
we can hear you, we can hear you.
The internet is still on, so we'll just proceed. Any information that is likely to cause substantial harm to the ability of the government to manage the economy. For instance, if today you are to be told that the most wanted criminal has been spotted in Kenya, basically that is going to cause some bit of commotion. So, that is information that government can decide to, withhold from members of the public. Then any information that might damage a public entity's position in legal proceedings, any information that can impede the due process of the law, and any information that can infringe on legal or professional privileges of an individual. For instance, a doctor-patient relationship, you cannot request for personal information about a patient from a doctor or even a lawyer. So these are some of the limitations that have been given by the Act. And, just reflecting back on the presentation made by Prof, I think among the things you said was, as a government, we also need to, what was this? Point number 5, it was about minimum exemptions. And yes, we do agree that it is important. In fact, one of the principles of access to information is that any piece of legislation should have narrowly defined exemptions. Those that are not very broad, so that public institutions can hide in that to deny access to information. And some of this might look very broad, but at least then that's why we exist as a CAJ. And basically, if you request for information from a public entity and that information is not given to you, then you can come to appeal to the Constitution, including in cases whereby you think, they've overstretched an exemption that is provided there. They are going too much into it. For instance, you think that they've denied to give you access to information because they think that information is of national security. Then you can come then to CAJ, to appeal that decision, and CAJ will follow it up. So that if indeed then CAJ is able to establish that information touches on national security, then it will stand by the decision of the public entity. But in any case, then CAJ is to establish that information, does not touch on what the institution alleges, then we will demand that institution discloses information. So these are basically the grounds for which you can appeal. One is refusal to provide requested information. You request for information, the institution just decides not to give you information without giving you any reasons for that. Then disclosure of edited information. So there are instances whereby you might request for, an original copy of information, but they give it to you in an edited format. That is, they've removed some bit of information that they think is not relevant to you. Then you can request for, you can appeal to the Commission. Then when access is given that is not in line with what was requested. So you requested for information A, but what the institution gives you is information B. So you can also appeal to us. Then access that is deferred or postponed, there are very clearly defined timelines within which a public institution and even private entity then should be able to provide access to information. Basically, the Act says that for information that is categorized as general information, that should be given within a maximum period of 21 days. But there are certain kinds of information that touch on either the life or liberty of an individual. For instance, you've been arrested by the police. You are being taken to court on allegations that you participated in robbery with violence. So you've been arrested by police. They're infringing on your liberty. And you have reason to believe that, there is evidence that you can get from Safaricom that will absolve you from those allegations. So Safaricom, if, you put in a request to them to provide evidence that on the said day that robbery took place, you are very far from that area, that is information that concerns your liberty. Then Safaricom is supposed to provide that information within 48 hours and not 21 days, because it is touching on your liberty. So the Act is very clear with the timeline. For general requests for information, then within 21 days. But for information that touches on the life or liberty of an individual, a maximum of 48 hours. Then if you are, there are reasonable charges given to you for provision of information, basically the Act requires that information should be provided free of charge. But in any case, then the institution has to charge you. There are instances whereby certain institutions have been allowed by the law that establishes them to make money out of giving out or generating information. Yeah, but there are institutions that have not been given that leeway. So in such an institution, if you request for information, then they should only charge you for the cost of duplicating. So that if you are asking for a one-page document, yeah, then you should only be charged for the cost of duplicating, either photocopying or printing that one-page document and supplying it to you. So that if they are supplying that one-page document by way of post office, then they need to add the charges for photocopying or printing plus the charges for postal postage charges. Yeah. So if you are uncharged and reasonable fees for access to information, then that is one of the grounds you can appeal to us. Then access that has been given to specific people that should not get that access, and also refusal to correct or update or annotate, yeah, information. So this act also allows you, yeah, as a citizens of this country, to approach a public entity that has your personal or private information and request them to update that information in case that information is incorrect or outdated. So you can approach a public entity to request that they update your personal information. A good example would be, for instance, at some point you are listed with the CRB that you had defaulted on a loan, but later on you go and clear the loan, and you are able to clean your CRB status. If you find that a certain commercial bank still holds your records as a defaulter, yet you've cleared with the CRB, then you need to approach the bank to update that information, of which failure for them to update that information within a reasonable time then allows you to come to the Commission on Administrative Justice to follow up with the bank so that the bank can update your information. So the Commission is also at liberty to decide on its own to review a decision that has been made out there in the public, in the public domain, even in the absence of anybody coming to complain to us, because these are issues that we can pick up within the media. And also that's where you come in, because some of the ills, some of these issues that are happening in the society, we are not able to know, not unless they are brought up by also people like you in the creative sector, through your creatives, yeah, your creatives work. So we are able to pick up some of the issues by way of media highlights, yeah, and some of these are things that you, the creatives, are able to pick up from the society. So as I finish on this, there are offenses and penalties. I won't go deep into them, but I'll be able to share my presentation and you can follow up. They are contained under Section 8 of the Access to Information Act, and the penalties are either fines or imprisonment terms, and they apply either to an institution or an individual. Allow me to end it at that, and thank you very much for listening to me. And I'm welcoming any questions, any comments, any reactions. Thank you so much, Prof.
Thank you very much, Victor, for immense clarity. Very, very clear and very informative presentation. And I think that there are a couple of questions that have already been posted on the chat. And I'm wondering whether, Mary, you can unmute Andrew. He had a question which was an important question, but even as he's coming in, I have my own question. Part of the ways in which access to information gets enhanced is through language. And it kind of still puzzles me that the Constitution of Kenya has not been translated to Kiswahili, despite Article 7 of the Constitution. And I don't know whether there is a way in which at CAJ you can help with that process to the extent that it increases access to justice when people are able to read the Constitution in the language that that they speak. Because I believe that once you translate from English to Kiswahili, it will be possible to translate from Kiswahili to other Kenyan languages easily. So my other question, which before Andrew comes in, relates to something that we chair the Creative Economy Working Group, which is a network of organizations. And we have been requesting for information on the cultural heritage sites of Kenya. And we've written to the National Museums of Kenya, and eventually we got information that the information we are seeking is financial information, and therefore it cannot be given to us. We wanted to see the extent to which the cultural heritage sites are generating, resources and where they are and so forth and so on. So I'm just wondering, what was the problem with our question and our request? I'll ask Andrew to ask his question, then maybe you can take a few going forward. Andrew.
Good morning, everyone.
We can hear you.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. I just have a few questions here in regards to what information is actually privileged, that is actually held by government. I work with the National Council for Law Reporting. Part of our mandate is actually to disseminate certain information to the general public through our website. So what we do, at times we collect policies and Hansards from various government institutions. But at times when we approach certain government institutions, they inform us that they cannot give us all the policies that they have because some are actually considered privileged. So the question is this: what are some of these information that government holds that can actually be considered privileged that cannot be shared by the general public? That was question number one. Two, as we are all aware, that judgments are also legal, public information. However, there are some judgments that actually expose the names of children, victims of rape. And if you look at the acts, the Access to Information Act, there's also the issue of right to privacy. And even if you look at the Children's Act as well, there's a clause, I think, not very sure, but I think it's Article 34 or something that clearly depicts that names of children or the people that actually associate with them should not be exposed, just to protect the vulnerability of children. So some of these judgments that are actually written, they expose the names of these children and victims of rape as well. So if it goes out there to the general public, aren't we violating some of these provisions of the Access to Information Act? And how can some of these things be cured? Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. I think I will ask you this other question, which has come up. As you know, there are certain decisions that are made by public entities which result from minutes of meetings held. We know that, for example, one of the areas that the creative sector works relates to, marginalized communities. So, for example, the LGBTQ, community, and we have had two cases of films being banned. So there was the film Rafiki, which was banned, which was written by Wanuri Kahio, and more recently, I Am Samuel, which was banned last week. So one of the challenges we are having is because the creative sector does not want to break the law. They are not interested in breaking the law. They just want to be able to operate within the law. Is it possible to ask for the minutes of such meetings to see the development of the argument towards banning of such films, so that when we are working with the sector, we are able to guide them in terms of how they can create without necessarily breaking the law. So I think those are just a set of questions. You can respond to those, and I think that would be good enough.
Okay. Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Bonahandru. Thank you, Churchill, for your questions. And I'll make an attempt to answer all of them. I'll start with the Prof's questions. Why the Constitution is not translated in Swahili. Indeed, I think this is the second time I'm getting such a question. And indeed, this should have been done long time ago. Of course, I think it's something we've also, I wouldn't be very sure on this, but I think it's something we've raised before with the Office of the AG. I wouldn't like to say with certainty, because I'm not so sure, but it's a question we have received in a previous engagement as well, and we brought it up. And so I would say there are still discussions around it, but ideally this is something that should have been done, long time ago. So Prof, unfortunately, I cannot give you, a response with certainty on how far we are with this, but it's something, we've received from a previous engagement, and I think we've shared with the Office of the AG. Perhaps if I can follow up and get to establish how far we are, then I can separately, reach out to you. Secondly, the issue of cultural ethics sites. I think that is information that should be given for the simple reasons. I talked about basically Section 5 of the Constitution that requires public institutions should be proactively disclose information. Among the information that should be proactively disclosed is about finances, how you are spending finances, and even how you're generating finances. Because, not unless then there is reason, to the effect that then that information is limited either by the law that establishes them or, any other piece of legislation, then that is information that should be given now. The way out to this, kindly, if you don't mind, please approach the Commission. Of course, you have a formal request, you have a formal response from, it is the National Museums of Kenya, you said? Yeah, so approach the Commission by way of, appealing on the decision of the National Museums of Kenya. Then the Commission will be able to follow it up with the National Museums of Kenya. So that would be my response to that. Andrew, you asked about privileged information in government. Indeed, as I've shared in my presentation, the only information that is considered privileged is what is contained under Section 6 of the Act, the exempt information. So those are the only instances whereby information held by government should not be given out. Yeah, anything beyond that should be given out. But I would say we have a challenge that, some institutions tend to hide in some of those exemptions to deny access to information. And we've received cases, from certain institutions, and we've been able to follow it up with them because I would agree some of the exemptions are broadly framed so that an institution can cheekily hide in, national security, hide in privacy, to deny access to information. But I would insist again, that's why we exist as the CAJ, so that in such instances, then, you can appeal to us so that, again, now we look at it from the basis of the law and the provisions of the Act, whether indeed it falls under the so-called exemptions that, they're hiding in. So again, I would say in such instances, of course, you've said there are certain institutions from whom you request policies, and there are certain policies that are not given. I would say we can work as government to government. You can do a letter to us requesting to know whether indeed the claims by that institution that these policies are not, for public consumption, whether indeed they hold. And maybe just to put it into perspective, I think since January this year, we've been having a case against KRA whereby I think an individual, a citizen, requested for information about, I think it's a policy, one of the policies that deals with tax calculations and all that. Yeah? And, KRA was of the opinion that that's an internal document. So that individual came to us by way of appeal. We followed up with KRA, and our decision was that, that policy should be disclosed because, yes, it could be an internal thing, but it concerns outsiders. Yeah, it is developed internally. It is supposed to be used internally, but the implications are felt by outsiders. I think our stand then was that that policy should be given out. Yeah. So I would also maybe just as I've requested to Prof, in such instances, then you can reach out to CHA on Andrew, so that we can look at how to intervene and be able then to see whether that information can be given out. The other critical thing I would want to say is that as it is currently, that Act, the Access to Information Act, does not have regulations. And that's why we are still having challenges with some of the sections of that Act. But we are currently in the process, almost finalizing the process of coming up with regulations. Since June this year, we've been holding public participations on the Act. I think the deadline was closed about 2 weeks ago for receiving views for members of the public. So within the regulations, the proposed draft regulations, then we are going to tighten some of these loose ends that we are having, especially on aspects of how to make a request for access to information, the bit on charges for access to information, the bit on the information access officer, because we are saying the information access officer can delegate that role to any other officer. So how far can that delegation then be done? There's also the bit of these exemptions. Yeah, we want to, try to tighten them so that they are not as broad as they are, so that at least then these public institutions can stop hiding, under the exemptions to refuse to provide access to information. So hopefully when that subsidiary legislation then comes into place, we'll be able to cure so many of the things that, of the challenges that we are having with the current law. So I hope I've been able to respond to your first question. The second is, so maybe still on the first question, privileged information is only that which is contained under Section 6 of the Act. So any public entity or even a private entity that claims that, certain piece of information is privileged, then they have to link it with Section 6 of the Act, yeah, to show then, how it is that it falls under the exempt information. Anything other than that, then that information should be given out. Then the issue of exposing names of children, rape victims, how to cure, that might be a bit of a challenge for now, but I would say that's feedback we are getting from you on an area that we need to probably intervene. And I started by saying it is a challenge in the sense that, the judiciary is a separate arm of government, and it has its own laws also that guide its own operations. At the moment, I wouldn't know if, there is a law that requires them to expressly or explicitly give out names of, the parties to a matter, including children, rape victims, and all that. I wouldn't say I have that information, but probably in the case then that maybe there is a law that requires, in judgments, the names of the parties, should be clearly and explicitly given out, then that would be a challenge. Because as well, the Access to Information Act has been developed, and we are alive to the fact that there are other laws that could be conflicting with the Act. And that's why I think towards the end of that Act, we have, they're called Transitional Provisions. Yeah, that look at, now this Act is coming into place and it is finding there are other acts that are in existence. Then how, does it relate to the other acts? Are there sections of the other existing acts that it is amending, or, then sort of how is it relating to the other acts? In the transitional acts that are mentioned in the Access to Information Act, I think there is none that talks about probably the operations of the judiciary. So this might be an area that probably we might need to critically look at internally, then requires also to engage with the judiciary. But that might take a bit of time. So as well for that, I wouldn't tell you that, I have an answer that, it is straight and, this is what we are going to do. So we will need to engage further with this. And that's why I'm thanking you, because it's a matter that you've, brought to our attention that I would forward to. We have a department charged with access to information issues. And we also have a commissioner who is supposed to promote access to information matters. So this is something I promise to escalate to the department so that maybe they can follow it up. Then the last thing is on, the case you've given. Is it possible to get a copy of the minutes? Yes, it is possible, provided, because this is a matter of immense public interest. Yeah, and the Constitution was clear, and even the Act, that there are some instances whereby the interest of the public, actually the Act was put in place to cater for interest of the public, so that information that is of immense public interest then should be given to the members of the public. And this is one of them, because there's a community, a whole community that is interested in this matter. Yeah, so you can make your request to the Kenya Film Classification Board requesting for their minutes. Of course, they might not give you the full minutes. They can give you in an edited form, because you're only interested on the matter of, the discussion surrounding the banning of like I am somewhere. Yeah, so they can give you, you can request even for an edited format of the minutes, touching around the issue of, how was the decision to ban I am someone arrived at. So that, because the board might have been talking about other internal things that are not important to you. Yeah, so in such a case, you can request. And if your request is declined, then I'll still insist, approach the CAJ by way of appealing, so that the CAJ can follow up the matter with the board. Yeah, so that if in case then the reasons given by the board are compelling enough, then CAJ will uphold the decision of the board. But in any case, then, there's reason to believe that whatever information you want does not fall under any exemptions, of which, to me, looking at the exemptions, then, there's no reason as to why you should not, you should be denied that information. Then that information then should be given to you. So thank you. I hope I've addressed all your questions, but please feel free to follow up with in case there is any more clarification required.
I think you have really answered the questions. I wanted to give Deborah a chance to make a comment because she's posted an issue which, in a sense, responds to what we are discussing on judgments. Maybe Deborah, if you can, if Deborah can be unmuted for purposes of asking her question or making her comment.
Asante, thank you, Prof. Thanks for this wonderful discussion. I was curious as to why the question on the NCLR was asked, because I thought it's a basic legal principle that you shouldn't post somebody's name in the case of sexual offenses, children's matters, and divorce, you always use initials. So I'm a bit confused by that question. Perhaps the NCLR representative could clarify where he's coming from.
Maybe even before that, Deborah,
Yes.
I also thought as much, and that's why, in responding to the question, I played it safe, because the last I checked, in such matters, the names are not supposed to be given, at least only the initials. But, there might have been developments that have changed, and that's why I wasn't really sure of that. That's why also I didn't want, to come out with certainty that, that's against the access to information provisions. Anyway, sorry.
I think that he can. I think that before he comes, I don't know whether he needs to really come back in, or maybe something that they can actually check at the Kenya National Law Reporting. And just for Andrew, we'll give you a chance, but before you do that, maybe Churchill can step back in. Churchill.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Victor, for that presentation. The reason why I asked this particular question is every time these bans happen, that's what I always do. I always send in that information request. And finally, at some point, I was a bit notorious in your office because I kept sending so many appeals. So to people like Chahale and Viola, they would make a lot of jokes about my appeals. I was just thinking maybe we should get like 20 creatives to send in the same information request, asking the same question, because even 20 or 30, and maybe this is something we can explore through the Creative Economy Working Group, Prof. Because I remember one joke we used to make in the office when we were working on access to information issues is, say, for example, you're a member of parliament and you keep getting the same information. Everyone keeps asking you, how much money do you have for bursaries this year, right? So if 100 people ask you this question, what it basically means is you should proactively disclose it already. So because you can't keep responding to the same request to 100 people, And some of the ways in which we activate these laws, the laws may be good, they may have good intentions and all of that, but we need to activate them through innovation and creativity also. And I think that is what, that is another way of pursuing these things. It's not enough to send in the information request as one person, right? What if the directors of the film send in the information request? Then Churchill sent in the information request. Then 30 other people send in the information request. And now, perhaps the more interesting thing you should mention here, Victor, is how possible is it for us to send in information requests virtually, without having to get the form and print it and sign and do all of that. I think those are other interesting things that we should come out clearly. For creatives and other people who normally don't get an opportunity to hear from you, So issues of cost are still a challenge for many people. Issues of, you have to make the request. Is it that you have to make it in a particular form or not? And those kinds of things. So mine was just, perhaps, Prof, that is something we can take up. To see let's see what happens. What if 30 people send in the same information request? What happens then?
I agree, Churchill. I mean, as you know, the Creative Economy Working Group has taken up this matter rather seriously for some time. And I would also want to confirm that we did write to CAJ some time ago, and they were very quick in responding to our questions. And we were able to get the information we got. So I know that CAJ does actually work. I agree with you with regard to really getting information from the Kenya Film Classification Board. There is information, for example, how much money they have collected from licensing. We need to know how much they have collected from the creative sector through licensing and how that money has been used, because it needs to be plowed back to the sector. And also with regard to the banning of films, we know that CAP 222 still operates and it allows them to do things, but we know that as a classification board, they're supposed to classify, not to ban. So they can classify as adults only, and they can classify in different ways. So I think that maybe this is something that we can discuss post this meeting to see how best to really push these matters of access to information, and also really creating more inclusive societies, more equitable, more democratic society. So I think I would like to pick that to pick up this matter with you post today, so that we can see how best to push this this forward. I don't know whether Andrew you want to come back in, but I thought that do you want to come back in, Andrew, and then we'll now finish up the meeting.
Yes, just to clarify on Deborah's point. Yes, indeed, as NCLR, we do have an internal policy to protect the identity of the vulnerable groups in society. However, the judgments that we receive from the courts, they usually disclose the names of the vulnerable groups in society. Some of them are not anonymized, some are anonymized. But there's no clear law that actually says that, and let's say, for instance, victims of rape, you should not disclose their names, especially when it comes to judgments. And these judgments are actually a public information, considering that advocates and even citizens are using them as precedents. So they can actually get them directly from the courts, or alternatively get them from the Kenya Law website. So whichever way they get it, there's still exposure there. There's still exposure out there. Even when it comes to issues to do with the cost list, for instance, matters to do with the divorce cases, the parties are normally disclosed. There's no law that actually says that those names should not be exposed outside there. So there's still a vacuum in terms of when it comes to judgment and the issue of access to Information Act. So if it was actually clear that if it can also apply to judgments as well, so that whenever judges and magistrates write their judgments, when they're dealing with certain groups in society, the names should not be disclosed. That can be a very good closure.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you very much for that. And I think that, Victor, you are getting information to carry forward in terms of further work, which could be intergovernmental institutions, just to protect individuals and also ensure that people have access and so on. So I think this is additional work. And I just want to, before we close, to say that because I was involved in pushing matters related to Kiswahili nationally, including translating the draft, the Constitution at CKRC, as well as the the Committee of Experts. We worked on those documents, and therefore we had an opportunity of actually even writing the Chief Justice on this matter. And I think that the gap is at the Attorney General's office. I think that the way you can do this is you engage the Attorney General's office, and you basically push it on the basis of access to the Constitution, and that when we translate, we increase accessibility, and of course Article 7, which makes Kiswahili an official language. So really, this is something that, again, I would like to follow up with you to see how best we can do this, so that we are also implementing Article 7 and therefore increasing this. And I also want to also challenge CAJ that because you work within the area of access to justice, you can also be very proactive in making sure that all your materials are bilingual. So your materials are available in English and Kiswahili, and that starts being the point of accessibility. And then, of course, you can go on now to Braille and other areas. And I think that there are many Kenyans who are willing to work with you to facilitate these processes. So I want to conclude by also just saying that on Thursday, we will have a session. You'll come back in. We'll have a session on misinformation and how we can, as a creative sector, help reduce misinformation. So I think all of us are invited to the Thursday meeting, same time. Then also to indicate that we will also be engaging on how to better access digital information as the creative sector. So how do we navigate, our platforms online to extract information that can be used for creativity? And I think that we are having discussions with the National Council for Law Reporting to see whether they can help us understand how to navigate, their space and so on. So I wanted to make those comments, but Victor, step back in, and then after you, we'll have Churchill.
Thank you, Prof, and thank you to all participants, actually, especially for those who've asked questions. Prof, I just wanted to react to a matter that Churchill brought up very quickly. The issue of making requests for access to information. Ideally, probably I forgot to mention it, but the Act requires that public entities and even private entities should come up with standardized forms for requesting access to information. But the Act is also still clear that, in the absence of using those forms, then information should still be provided. And one of the steps that we've taken is to sensitize and to require of public institutions specifically, because those are the ones that we interact with mostly, by way of reporting, that they need to have communication channels for requesting access to information. These include even email addresses, and they also need to publicize the names of the information access officer. That is where to channel your request. So in short, what I'm saying is you don't need to physically visit a public entity to request for information. You can do that by way of email. And personally, let me look at myself now as a citizen. I've requested for information from including NEC, and I just did that by way of email, and I was able to get that information by way of email, so that the cost should not be a barrier. The distance should not be a barrier. You don't have to physically go to a public entity to fill the form and request for information. You can do that, remotely by using email address. You can send a postal, letter. You don't have to fill those forms. So that's just the clarification I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. And I really want to thank you once more for fantastic engagement with us today. And I would like to just say that we will definitely be asking you to engage with other sectors of the creative sector, because the creative sector is very broad. And I hope that you'll be available like you've done today to support us, because I think, as I keep saying, this country is ours. So we are committed to making it better for now and the future generations. So really, thank you so much. I want Churchill now. You can step in, Churchill.
Yeah, there's really nothing much to add than to thank you, Victor, and everyone else for your submissions today. Apologies for the technical hitches. We're going to correct that, but I'm glad to share that the people who are not able to join here managed to join in via Zoom. So, Prof, perhaps just the last thing to share is that we are trying to develop a toolkit for creative sector practitioners on access to information. So we'd be looking forward to also getting your comments on that as we set out rolling it out, maybe in the coming weeks or even a month. But to thank you all for your participation and hoping to see you in the other engagements we'll be inviting you for. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. And just to also say that for the Thursday meeting, I think we'll do it in a manner that is not a webinar, to allow for more participation, because I think that people are having trouble because of the configuration of the webinar. I think we'll just do a normal Zoom link, which we shall share. But also just to say that the discussion was